My name is Fairoz, and I am working in Oracle JDK team as a JVM sustaining engineer. Today, I will be talking about practical approaches how we can debug core files. For example, like when the core files are important, why we need to worry about the core files, and when they are very important in debugging aspects. Okay, this is our agenda. We'll try to see why we need to debug, when how we debug actually, and what is the core file, how it is related to debugging application, and then we'll see what exactly the core file contains and when it is helpful. And then I will emphasize on a small demo example, and then I will demonstrate that how the core files are important in such scenarios. Okay. So when we debug, okay, there are certain scenarios. For example, like let's say like there is a misbehavior in the application or in the program. For example, like if you have designed an program which is supposed to print employees of an organization, and you know that there is certain like 500 employees, but the application is printing only 499, or it is printing one extra employee. So this is not a normal behavior, right? Because it is not the expected one. So what you need to do is you need to get into a debugging mode or debug an application and trying to figure it out which employees it is missing or which employee it is printing double, or whether it is printing multiple employees, right? So you need to find out what is the problem actually, underlying problem. So that time you get into debugging mode when you observe there is abnormal or not a proper behavior of the program. Second issue could be related to thread. If you have multiple threads, there are multiple threads involved and doing a lot of synchronization and all. If something goes wrong, like for example, like if there is a producer and consumers are there, and producer is still keep on producing the item before consumer is consuming it. So that time synchronization come into picture. Though it looks very simple one, a problem, but if you have multi-thread or application where thousands of threads getting created and they need to be in the proper sync, otherwise things may go wrong very badly, and this may lead to a lot of issues. In such issues also we need to debug and find out what's going on. Next we have issues related to memory. For example, like there could be which is sort of a small poison kind of thing, slow poison kind of thing, which is like growing day by day or hour by hour or every iteration of the application, right? Iteration of particular function. Small chunk of memory is getting leaked, and this memory will appear only at the end of over a period of time. Like for example, like your application is running for more than 6 months, and after 6 months only you realize that the application has consumed for, let's say, 500 MB extra, which is like it is still growing, continuously growing. So definitely there is a memory leak. Over 6 months you have consumed 500 MB. In reality, we have seen like it consumes only 20-30 MB also over a 6 month period of time, but it is a leak. There is some leak, maybe in bits or in bytes, memory leak is happening. This is not good. This you need to debug and find out. These are very challenging scenarios which you have to deal with. In such scenarios also you need to debug. And then what we have is next case we have access related to valid or invalid access. For example, like when the process starts, right, the OS allocates certain chunk of memory for the process to operate on that. It is operating system features. I think it is pretty much we are all from the engineering background, and even if you are electrical and electronics, the first sem, right, they will teach first year of the course, they will teach operating system concepts. Very basic thing, like which basic thing of operating system is that it has to take care of memory, and it has to allocate resources when there is a demand. So how it does is like it launches processes based on what demand it is, and then it start allocating the memory based on the demand from the processor. So now the chunk of memory is allocated for that particular process. Process is allowed to read and write into that chunk of memory in case, and it has some read-only accesses to other different parts of memory access. For example, like kernel memory. I think you people know all this because I'm going a little bit basic concepts explaining. For example, like you have this is kernel memory, right? And on top of that, you have a process memory here. This is your process memory. When the OS starts, right, this kernel memory is operating this operating system, your OS here. And when operating system create a process, it allocates a chunk of memory for it. So this is where it can read and write here. Read, write, execute, whatever you do it here. This is your territory for that particular process. And it may have some read access to the kernel memory here. There is a read access, but there won't be any write access. In case process is trying to modify this chunk of memory in the kernel space here, trying to write, it is not allowed, because if somebody comes and writes into kernel memory, right, what happens? Kernel will be corrupted, right? So which is not right, because your complete OS has gone. OS will be like may have some abrupt functionalities if this is allowed. So the basic feature of the operating system is to protect its own code, right? Its own code, its own data structure, all that things. In certain scenarios, it's allowed to write, but not in all the cases. For example, like if you are what I can say, like requesting some input, and if you are trying to modify some tables in operating system, for example, like if you are changing the display properties, so you need to have a root access, even the process you are modifying. For example, like if you are trying to, what I can say is like change a display setting from the command prompt. So that time, if you are a sudo only, for example, if you are root user only, it is allowed, even though it is a process, but it asks like who is trying to do it. Okay, even it is a process. If the process has a permission to do that, even in the kernel space, you can do that. You can modify. But I'm not getting into that. Try to understand that it is allowed only in case you have a permission. But in normal case, it is not allowed. For example, from our application, we don't try to modify display setting and all in most of the cases. Okay, so that is one thing. So I just explained like how the system is allowed to do valid and invalid memory accesses. Okay, and finally what we have is invalid instruction. So this will be a very deeper concept or understanding how the invalid instruction happens. For example, like whatever programming applications you use on top of it, right, finally it converts into assembly language. Okay, the code will be whichever language you use, finally the code will be converted into assembly language. And when you say assembly language, you must have seen certain instruction like move, add, subtract, load instructions, or load to memory, read to memory, all that instructions, right? So there are such set of instructions. For example, every operating system has its own, every platform has its own set of instructions. Okay, so if you have written some instruction which is not allowed on a particular platform, the invalid instruction error will be thrown. I don't want to get into that because this will need more deeper understanding, but understand that even for debugging, you certain scenarios also will be encountered. Okay, how will you debug? Generally, people do add logs. I'm also do that. Most of the cases when I see there is an issue, I try to add logs in all over the application, and trying to, the intention of adding log is trying to understand what is the flow actually, how the flow is happening. For example, if there are if else conditions, so I just want to know, adding some printf saying right, no, okay, inside if or inside else, like that, trying to understand like how the flow is happening, and then try to print the local and local or parameters passed to that particular function, right? Trying to understand like what parameter it is passed, so that I can guess or I can judge based on this parameter what is happening. So this is a very basic thing of adding debugging logs, which I prefer basically. Generally, the people, those who are very attached to writing the coding with the command prompt, right, like using vim editors and all, use add this feature like debugging with logs. So generally, I do that. Next could be like using standard debuggers. I think many of you, those who use nice IDEs like IntelliJ is there, Eclipse is there, NetBeans is there. There are so many IDEs, right? So the IDEs will come with inbuilt debuggers. For example, like when you start debugging in Eclipse FIU and all, right. So you can see that immediately there are certain windows will come up, and it will show you like what is the state of the memory, what is the state of local and global variables. You can add watch points, and you can enable some more windows here and there. Very nice looking, and you can monitor a lot of things at the same time. That is one way. So while debugging, you can go through a lot of other details also, which may not be required, but it gives like IDE gives all that thing. So because it has its own debugger. That is how you can debug. I was explaining like how you can debug memory related issues, for example, like memory leak or heavy usage of the memory, which lead to throwing out of memory errors over a period of time. So that sort of issues you can take memory dumps over a period of time, like every month or every day, based on how much memory is consumed over a period of time, and then start analyzing or start comparing the memory and then see like which part of the memory is growing over a period of time, and then you can focus on that part, go a little bit deeper. It is like basically you are trying to narrow down the problem and trying to understand like what exactly the code chunk of code which is leaking them. Again, like debugging just not like you just keep entering F5 F9 and all, but again a lot of things like you take JFR recordings and start analyzing using the JMC all the recordings. So this is also a way of debugging. And then the finally, which I'm interested in today's talking, like postmortem analysis. Why we need postmortem analysis? There are two scenarios here. One thing is that if you have encountered some issue which is not reproducible always, for example, like it happens rarely. Rarely means very, very rarely. Out of 1,000 times, one time it only it happens. In certain scenarios, what you can do is like you can take a code dump of that when that crash happens. For example, like let's see crash. From you are using some native code and the native code is getting into crash. So what you can do is you can basically collect that crash or generate a crash when certain scenario happens. You can generate a crash and take that crash and analyze. One scenario is that. Second scenario could be like your application is used by your customer and customer sees this crash at the production. Okay, production, he is trying to do something and then he just saw the crash happen. So customer and crash, it is very serious issue because in the production and that too, so their application is running and immediately they saw a crash. Now you cannot reproduce that at your end because we don't know like what parameters, what exactly the scenario when the customer reproduced that issue. It happened only once, but the hard evidence is that we have a crash, we have a code dump. Let's try to understand what exactly the code dump is, because unless and until you understand the code dump, you will not able to understand what is a postmortem analysis. For example, let's see that the crime is happening. Okay, now the forensic team comes, visit the crime location, and they try to take the complete, evidences from the crime spot. Okay, the murder has happened. Murder may not be there at the spot, but the victim, all that things, right? Crime location, the fingerprints, they all capture and they will make it in a file, and then they will hand over it to the investigation officer who will going to investigate that case. Okay, it is similar to that. When the crash happens in the application point of view, application will try to collect all the what I can say evidences from the crashing point. For example, in our case, it's trying to collect what all the threads were involved, what first of all the process crashes, right? You are running something as a process application. When you start, right, it is started as a process by the operating system. So when the process crashes, what operating system does is operating system try to collect all the information what the process was doing, the state of the process, what is its parent ID, what is its PID ID, all that. And inside the process might have already launched lot of threads. Okay, so it collects all the thread information, all the threads, what all the state of the threads in every thread, what is the stack. Okay, what all the stack frames were there in every frame, what was the information about the stack, like frame information, and what all the register information, each and every minor detail it collects. And apart from that, it collects the information about the process memory. I was explaining, right? OS gives a chunk of process memory for the process so that it can operate on that. It collects entire process memory, dump of the memory when the process was running, when the process was active, right? What was the state of that memory, and how much heap it was using, what exactly the content was stored, everything will be captured. And this is nothing but the same thing what I was mentioning in the real-time murder case, right? When the forensic team collects and put it into a file. Similar thing, operating system is collecting and putting into a file which is called as a core file.
The data which is written into the core file, we can customize that data, or it's like the operating system pre-decides that these are the informations that need to go. or is it the maximum amount of data that they publish into the core file?
Yeah, very good question, Vaibhav. It is operating system decides, and it basically collects each and everything, whatever available thing. As I mentioned, right, it collects everything. The core files are like ELF format, executable linkable format, and the data is arranged in a sequence. For example, like if you have seen ELF format, maybe it is again a fun to concept. But ELF files will contain the sections, different sections, right? Everything is arranged in a section. So it arranged the data based on like sections, like header section will be there, and header section will know all the information about the other section. Like there are some data section, there are some code section. If I say code section, that means the assembly code on which it is operating. When I'm saying data, means it is the data structures on which it is operating. For example, like the chunk of memories will be there, and the certain table information will be there. All that things comes into data section. So a lot of sections will be there. So the core file will be arranged into that, and it contains the lot of information. The customer code files we have seen, it goes up to 30 GB. Okay, on the server application. So it contains everything. It is up to you what exactly you are looking for. Okay, I hope. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, if you're saying it goes up to 30 GB, then
Yeah.
well, it's possible that it might crash the system only if, let's say, the space is not that code dump and stuff. Does it
Uh,
talk about that what is the hard disk available and then create the dump, or it will just do it?
See, I'll try to touch upon that. See what happens, right? How it works. For example, your process is running here. Okay. Now process has. I think I will touch up this in coming slides also. I'll just highlight this. Now process has done some damage to like operating system, or it has generated some signal which is led to dump a core. Then what operating system does is operating system launches another thread. Okay. Another process, not thread, sorry, another process to dump this particular process information, okay, and generate a core dump. Let's assume that yeah, in a way of doing that, if it is realized that for dumping also there are some user settings. For example, like user has to do a limit how much he wants to dump, or it can dump the entire process space. If you have given unlimited space, you can dump it. So it's try to dump in that, and if it is identified that I don't have enough memory to dump the complete thing, because it knows what is the size from the reading the header itself, what is the size of the core file. If it is realized that I cannot dump it, it just exits saying that out of memory error for this particular process. It cannot do much, and it just comes out. It doesn't crash operating system as such. Operating system are designed in such a way that it should not crash the complete OS. Windows, it crashes sometimes, but nowadays they are pretty handy. They are not crashing much. But Linux, I haven't seen that the crashes are so often. But yes, it should not crash. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is Firoz somewhere between like the life and the death, right? When process is killed, but operating system has not yet killed it. In between that, OS will try to dump this all information, right?
Exactly. It has not killed yet. After dumping only it will kill.
So after dumping all the information, OS will kill this process, because I mean it is anyway corrupted.
Yes. What action it is trying to do, right? It is not allowed to do that action. So then the signal will be generated. Once the signal is generated, the first high priority task is that what you do, right? All the threads will be paused. Safe pointing, right, Vaibhav? It is like that. They all put into a safe pointing, and then you take a complete dump, and then let application to crash. A process to terminate. It just terminates the process. So it is like that.
Yeah. Thank you.
What is the core file? So this definition, I took it from the man page of the core. What it explains is that the default action of certain signals is to cause a process to terminate and produce a core dump. Here you can see that there are few terms are coming, which I will be emphasizing more. It says that action of certain signals. There are signals will be generated which take certain action. Based on that action, right, what process does cause a process? Sorry, it causes the running process to either terminate, okay, or just terminate and produce a core dump. We have to understand this. What it is saying, the default action of certain signal is to cause a process to terminate and produce a core dump. Okay. The next again important thing what it tells is a file containing an image of process memory at the time of termination. So it is a file. Okay, when the process terminate, right, it has all the information about the process memory at the time of termination. So I was explaining, so you have a process. This is a process launched by your operating system. So basic concept, right? Operating systems, when you want to do something, everything will be launched as a process. So when it launches, it allocates some default memory to the process. So let's assume that this is a memory information. Okay. Now what happens, right? If process is let's give me a simple example so that you people can understand. Process has read-write access to this particular memory, which is very clear. It has read-write access. Okay. Now let's try to do, process is trying to modify some chunk of memory in the operating system part. For example, like let's see, if you have memory, right, start with 0. Sorry, my handwriting will be like this because I'm using mouse. Some memory here, and let's assume that up to 4 GB 32-bit machines, up to 4 GB will be allocated for let's assume that OS, and 2 GB will be for operating system core, I can say, where the operating system is loaded. Here operating system is loaded, right, and this memory operating system will be using for to do its housekeeping, like launching processes, killing processes, keeping all the table information, each and everything like that. So this is the core in the sense like to operating system is also something, right, which is also written in some native code so that it has to be running all the time. Now your process, which is running in a user space, let's try to understand this, something called as user space, and this is running in the kernel space. With respect to Linux, I will explain because which is easier for you people to understand. Okay, this is not you, this is not we, it is you. Okay, so user space and kernel space. Now somebody from the user space is trying to modify something in the kernel space here, so which is nothing but here where the operating system is loaded or operating system running its own code. Now you realize that this is not allowed, this is not permitted, right? So certain signal will be generated by operating system. It knows it is again, this is also a feature of operating system. If you have studied the OS concept, right, it has to protect its own data structure. Okay, it should allow only the permitted people to do that changes in the its own data structure, its own code. Its code nobody should allow to modify. Only the kernel code. Kernel only is allowed to modify the kernel code. No one else is allowed to modify. But the data structure, what it is operating, yeah, it depends. Like it can use some sudo access to root to modify that data structure. For example, I was explaining about the display options and all, right? So that way. And now when somebody is modifying here, it generates some signal. Let's see, if you might have seen like signal 11, segmentation fault signal, right? When you're trying to modify some chunk of memory over here, modify chunk of, not chunk of memory, I can say, some section of the code, which is not, if you map into OS that everything is ones and zeros, it is some sort of some location in the OS which is getting modified. The location could be like some running some code, or it could be like memory location, whatever it is. So when it is trying to modify that location, which is either ones and zeros, okay, the OS will generate that this guy, which is running like this in user space, right, doesn't have a permission. So it generates signal 11. Once OS gets that signal 11, right, what it does, it try to understand who has generated this signal, from whom the signal 11 is generated. It is this guy, process. Okay. Once the signal is understood, like who is generating, immediately it will stop, because it doesn't allow it to modify its own kernel code, because if that happens, like complete OS will be corrupted, which is not allowed. That is a basic fundamental or functionality of the OS to protect its own code. So what it does, it terminates the process. Now, based on what signal is received, right, the process will be completely dumped, or process dumped in the sense like the same thing. Certain signal, which I just explained, which signal is to cause the process to terminate and produce a code dump. So what it does is, it just terminates and dump all the information, like all the memory information into a file, and all what process is doing. Everything will be dumped into a file, and this file is called as a core file. Okay, I think I will explain you what all the signals. Okay, let me show you. So man 7, I hope the screen is visible to you guys.
Yes.
Okay, this I'm opening man page for the signal. Signal 11 is it has actions of the signal what they does. That is the reason I'm using 7 for that. So you can see that there are some 41 or 42 signals are there in Linux operating system, which tells that what the signal is, what exactly the action to be taken when this particular signal is received, what action the operating system takes. Okay, and the small description about this particular signal. For example, let's take this case here, sig about. Okay, if this signal is received, the default action what operating system has to do is operating system has to dump a core. Means it has to terminate the signal and just dump the core. Okay, there are certain signals. For example, like if you're trying to kill a process, happy kill with -9, right? And give the process ID of that particular process you want to kill. That time, you are only killing. Don't need the OS to dump core, right? Because this is something like abort, in the sense like some signal received which is telling that a process to abort, which is not a normal thing. But certain things were like alarm kind of signal alarm, okay, which is like just terminate, don't do anything. Or some bad memory access happened with SIGBus. Again, this will, like it is not a normal way. Again, you dump a core. And certain signal will be ignored, for example, like CHLD, which is nothing but child stopped or terminated when the process launched child, and child, for some reason it got terminated, which parent doesn't have any idea. So that is just an ignore kind of. So this is an default action. So when you see the core, right, that time only the core file will be generated, not for all the signals. And today I will be talking about this segmentation fault when from the user space, when we try to modify something for in the kernel space, right, what happens. So it is like we receive a signal 9, which is a segmentation fault, not 9, signal 11, which is a segmentation fault. And for that, core will be dumped. Okay, so that is what these signals have, all signals have the number, and the segmentation fault is signal 11. For that, the core will be dumped. So that is what I am going to explain. So if you see my this presentation, right, I was explaining this man page of the core file, right? It talks about the certain signals. So it is not all the signals, so very few signals which are like taken action of dumping a core. So that is what it is. And what it contains the process entire memory and the state of the process. Okay, so this is what the contents of the core file. Okay, any questions here? Any question understanding this concept? By the time I raise my slide.
So when we are taking core dump, we don't just the user space memory, not the kernel space memory, right? Or OS related.
Kernel memory is not required for me to take a core dump, right? Only the OS memory only I will take, but I will try to understand like what exactly it was using in the kernel memory that led to crash. For example, like which part of the memory in the kernel it is trying to access, which is not in the user space. That information will be there. Okay. Okay. Let's move to next. I think I covered this. What are the signals and their default action? Next, what the core file contains. I think roughly I covered this. Like process state, what the process was doing, in the sense like what was the state of the process, what is its PID, what is its parent's PID, all that information. PID is process ID. Okay. Information will be there. Next, it has detailed information about all the threads. Okay. So if I say process information, in the sense like it contains names of the threads which are all running in the process, but it doesn't contain all the detailed information when I say process information about it. But the thread information contains the complete details of each and every thread. For example, if you launch 1,000 threads, all the every thread information will be right. Like what was the stack thread? Thread has its own stack, right? Stack memory. So what the information of that stack? How many frames were allocated in the stack? And what all the contents of the each frame. Okay, each and every minor detail will be captured in the code file. And then there will be some information about the memory map file. What is a memory map file? For example, let's say in your application you are trying to use some different, not different, if you loaded some library SO files and all, right. So that files will not be mapped into your process space. For example, like if you're running this in a process space, right? Process memory. Let's say this is a process memory, and some SO files will be loaded in some different place. And based on your need, they will be loaded into process memory, and you can execute that. So this memory mapped file, or is not loaded, I can say, there is just a pointer reference which will be pointing to here. So that is called as mapped. You will be mapping this. There could be n number of files which you will load and basically trying to execute when there is a demand. So this it is just a references. Okay. So this is like just mapping. So this is called as memory map file. These are all the files like memory map. So you need to take a dump of this because you should know like what exactly you are doing when there is a demand. Okay. And moving next, when core files are helpful, I think I just touched upon this. One scenario is that when the problem is the crash is happening, but it is very, very difficult to reproduce the crash. I can say it's intermittently crashing out. If you run application or if you run your test case or whatever it is for 1,000 times, only one time it is crashing. Very, very hard to reproduce. So in such cases, what you do, you can take a like you can allow your operating system to take a core or generate a core file from that crash. And then what you can do is you can take that core and try to debug, like doing a postmortem. You have collected all the evidences. Now you examine each and every evidence and trying to understand the correlation between the evidence. It is like investigating the case and trying to understand like how this could be related. And if you have a code chunk of code, trying to map with the code like, okay, these are all the start of the function, right? I got these are the parameters, and if I put with this parameter, what can the function behave, and whether it went into a if condition, whether it went to a else condition, all that things you can examine. So that is what like you can debug with the core file. And the second problem could be like the problem is happening only at the customer end or place where you cannot reproduce at your end. So the scenario where you have multiple containers, multiple threads, or what, like Kubernetes, everything is running, and very difficult to reproduce kind of scenario where customer end the crash is happening, and now you have to debug and find out what went wrong. So this kind of certain scenarios which are very difficult to reproduce, right? So these scenarios also you can examine using the core file. So one of the example I will tell you. This particular case, when I was debugging, it is a JDK problem, but you can try to understand like this scenario where we have something called as intrinsic code. In JDK, right, there are some functions which are like native functions which will be called based on the platform specific thing. Here, what happens, right? Like to speed up, like cipher blockchaining is like if you know the cryptography, right? It is 128 cycles it has to do, and to generate a key, basically to encrypt or decrypt, right? It has to do a lot of iteration based on your cipher in the sense your data. Again, this is a difficult concept to understand. It is a security concept, like how exactly it works. It takes the data and do a lot of what I can say, same operation it does, just changes the key based on the what is the key you provided, keep changing the apply the key and keep changing the data again and again, and do 128 times, or like 1,000 times to 2048 times, like that, based on how you have configured it. So same operation you will be doing again and again. So in such cases, what happens, right? Writing a Java code will be a bit slower. So what in JDK they have done it, they have written the code in assembly, directly in assembly. So that is called as intrinsic code. And such method is called, you directly redirect it to intrinsic function, so that the like execution will be very fast. So we saw this problem in Solaris Spark platform where this decrypt method of the cipher blockchaining, right, has an issue. So when we debug this, it took more than 2 months for me to like fix the problem or understanding the problem took a long time. Fixing it was just a day. Trying to understand this was, I was adding logs. That was my favorite thing, to just add logs and trying to understand in the Java code. Then I realized that no, it is not a problem in the Java code. There's some issue happening in the native code. So I went in the native code and tried adding logs over there. Again, I realized that not only in the native code, there are some like assembly chunk of code is there where the problem is happening. Adding log in assembly was not difficult one, but it was compared to like the application which I was running. If I try to add logs in the assembly code, it was not crashing. Okay, Why it was not crashing, I will explain to that. But when I was debugging, I was not able to understand that why it was not crashing when I add locks in the assembly code. So what we did was, like, after having discussion with my colleagues and others, I said, why don't we take a code dump and then start analyzing so that you can examine a lot of things. So what I did was, like, I did a code dump and started analyzing. Then I realized that there is one global variable which was G6, which we were using. The state of that variable was not saved. So when we were trying to extract that variable, right, so it was getting a corrupted value. Okay, and the fix was pretty simple. Let me show you. The fix was, this is just a test case to write. To we have to write a test case to prove that how our fix is working. So it is that. So don't worry about that. So fix is just like, instead of using a global variable, right, you have to use a local variable. So that was the fix. So that was pretty simple. It was done in a day, but the finding out the fix was a difficult one. And it was very specific to this Solaris Spark platform. So why it was not crashing when I added a locks in the assembly code is because that this global variables was assigned to some other thing, and because of that, in our real code, right, some different global variables was used, and that state of that was saved, so it was not crashing. I have to debug. Adding log was creating a problem for me. You people also might have seen in your applications, right, sometimes related to synchronization issues, and all. If you add logs, you will realize that, okay, issue is not reproducing when you add logs. We have seen that in most of the cases. I'm not sure how many people you have debugged that synchronization related issues, but it is more practical thing. Okay, so this is the one case. Let's get into demo mode.
Can you just elaborate a little bit on that part where you said adding logs actually does not help reproduce the issue? It's very interesting. I just want to know a little more.
Okay, fine. So what was happening, right? If you see the problem, where the problem was, like, we were using a global G6 register. Let me show you how the register state will be. This is the crash HSRR file. There are some global variables like G1 to G7, okay, and then there were some output variables O1 to O7, and then there are some local variables L1 to L7. Then there are some input registers. Sorry guys, I'm getting into too much native, but I think Jay has asked this question, so I'm just clarifying him. So there are some variables, registers, so which operating system will be using for its own purpose, okay, and there are some registers will be dedicated. In our code, what we were doing, like, we have dedicated some registers to do certain things. For example, like some global variables from G1 to G5, it was dedicated that we will be using for certain purpose. And then in this particular case, the problem started when we were using key from normal key length to a dynamic key length. If you read more about this, right, I will just paste it on the chat. If you read out, you can read. This is a open source, like you can read all the information available. So what we did was, like, we just managed to change the key length from fixed key length to a dynamic key length. So fixed key length was 128 bits, and when it got changed, right, the remaining, the additional part apart from 128 bits was storing into a G6 register, okay, because these registers also has a fixed length. So if you say register or pointer, right, it is a based on operating system. For example, like 32-bit is a 4-byte pointer, and in 64-bit it is a based on the 64 bits, which is a 8-byte, right? That is clear, right? Why it is 4-byte and why it is 8-byte?
Yes.
Yeah, good. So what we were doing is, like, after, if it is crossed 128 bits, right, the remaining portion will be saved into a G6 register, but we were not saving the state of that. We were saving only the, it is a very common fact, because you don't save unless and until it is required. And this is the only place where the G6 was used. So the fix was that either you use local variable or you save the state of the G6 also. Saving the state of G6 was a bit complicated process because we were saving the chunk of register in many places. So we thought, let's use ELC. Now, when I add some logs, right, you can add logs in here native codes, like you can have some printfs, then the code will be called. So when I started adding logs, so even to execute that log, right, again, there is some assembly code will be generated. or you have to write here in only in the assembly, like how you print a log, a small chunk of code. So that code, to execute that code, again you have to allocate some register, and the state of the register will be again changed. Let me explain this. Let's see, this is your stack. Okay, so you started executing here some code. Now you added printfs here. Printf is nothing but a system call, right? So execute this printf, again stack frame will be called. Okay, and you are executing some instruction here. Now let's see G6 register here. You are having some value G6 register here. After you call printf, right? You modified the G6 register here. But only thing is that you have not saved the state here. Okay, it got modified, and this guy is not bothered like whether I have to clear it up, because nobody's bothered, because who is using now, they have to take care of this. Now once it got returns, right, it gets this value, which is again modified or something, where, or if it says like it is used, and when I'm trying to print, I got some correct value only, or I got some value which is not relevant, or when it is executing this code, right, it has already corrupted. By that time, if you call printf, right, the value is again changed, or it got some different value, which is not leading it to crash. Okay, so that was the case which was happening here, because of the lot of adding printfs, right, not allowing it to crash. It was very difficult to understand problem, because it was very long back that I debugged this. It's 2018, I guess. Yeah, 2018, 2019 time, like two years back. But it was challenging, also interesting, because sometimes very, very difficult to understand the problem, because it was, I'm in the hotspot domain, and this is happening in the cryptography. You have to understand like what exactly is happening. You have to understand the problem first. So the good solution could be like you just take a dump and try to understand that. Yeah, again, taking dump also, you need to have some basic understanding. Okay, so I hope that clears your doubt, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay.
Feroz, one question, like,
Yeah.
can you take the dump any time during the program is running, or is that only it's that automatically generated when the crash happens?
See, like you have to generate some signals. I was explaining here, right? Man signal, man 7 signal. So it has to have this signal. Then only the crash happens. Otherwise, the crash won't happen. The crash happens, but core won't be generated. If you remember in Java, like we have, if you're running a Java application, right, and you can generate a core also. For example, if out of memory is happening, or there is some flag heap dump on out of memory error. So heap will be dumped. Okay, crash on out of memory. For example, basically for out of memory, right, we don't crash. We don't generate a core. Okay, so it is not a signal what we receive for generating a core for out of memory. Okay, but we can specify, like if you want to generate a core, like there is a flag like crash on out of memory error. Let me show you that. I'm not sure whether you have seen crash on out of memory error. So if you see, right, crash on out of memory error, I think you have to read this. So if you enable crash on out of memory error, so if you enable this particular flag, right, then only the core will be generated. So you have to send this particular flag for your Java application to do that. Okay.
Why I asked?
Yeah.
Okay, why I asked that question was because at the beginning of the session, you are mentioning that we can check the memory leaks as well, right? But sometimes there might be memory leaks and the application might not crash. So in that case, this will not be useful, right?
Exactly. So memory leaks means generally it depends. Like if memory leak is happening in such an extent that it is filling up the memory and out of memory error is thrown, that time definitely you can enable this particular flag and take a core dump. But in normal cases, memory leaks will not lead to out of memory errors. For example, like very small chunk of memory is getting leaked, and nowadays systems are coming up very huge memory. So that time, that time you may not realize it. But like memory leak is happening, it is very, very slow. That time what you do is you take like heap dumps at certain intervals, memory dumps, and then start analyzing that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So if not, then I will demonstrate the issue.
So one question, Firoz Vaibhav here.
Yeah.
This segmentation fault can be misleading also, right? I mean, it is possible that the code has went wrong somewhere, and then it continue working, and then it core dumped at somewhere else, right? I mean, it is not at the same place, right, where the actual problem has happened.
Can you repeat the question? I think I just
Means what I am saying you that you try to do some illegal access, and somehow the code has continued for some more time.
Okay.
And then it has generated the code dump for you.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So you have seen scenarios like this anytime, or
yeah, that happens. Let me explain you what scenario it happens. Let me take a pen again. Let me give one simple scenario. Let's see you are running 2 threads. Okay, this is thread 1 and this is thread 2. Okay, so now let's see, this thread 1 has given some memory access to this thread, guys. Okay, this is the memory access you have to access and do your work. Okay, before doing that, it do a lot of things before to that. Okay, and this guy started continue. This guy has done the damage. Okay, and it is still continuing here running. It has just passed that memory what needs to be done, and it is still running. So it is going on. So and this particular guy, poor guy, he doesn't know what needs to be done. It knows only that you pick up this memory here and start doing some operation. And before to that, it has also done a lot of things. Epilogue has done a lot of things, and then it went to this memory and it's trying to do something on this particular memory. It generated into a crash. Now we don't know whether it has done that initial work, right? This chunk of memory, what it has received from here. Okay, this guy has passed, the thread 1 has passed this chunk of memory, this memory access, which is not in the process space, user space, but it is in kernel space. But we don't know like how it got into this value, right? Because this thread has already passed its state, and it is doing something, lot of other things it has done, and we don't know what exactly it has passed here. And we don't know whether it is passed from here or this thread 2 has done initial thing, lot of things here, right? That memory generated that value, we got it from there. So we don't know that part, whether it came from here or it came from here. So in such scenarios, but we got a crash here somewhere because of this access. So now it is very difficult that what exactly has happened, because of whether it is from its own threads problem or it is coming from some different thread problem. We don't know which thread has passed what. Now I'm assuming that we have only 2 threads. Let's assume that we have 1,000 threads. Okay, and some thread has passed some information, and based on that information it has generated some value over here, some memory value, and that memory value it is accessing here, which is led to a crash. A very difficult problem. Whatever you say is correct. Like problem might have already happened, but we are realizing very late.
Right. This will be insanely tough to debug actually.
This is really difficult tough to debug actually. Certain scenarios where we have a GC problems, right? It end up like this only, most of the cases. Yeah.
Thanks, boss.
Yeah. Any other questions?
So, Firoz, just a quick question here. So this here we see something called thread dump as well, right? Instead of core dump.
Thread dump is different.
Yeah. So right now, the one that what we discussed here might be related to a thread dump issue, or I mean, core dump and thread dump are interrelated. Or core dump does have the thread dump information, or is it a different command altogether to generate the thread dump? Okay. And in the scenario that what you just explained right now, does thread dump is more helpful or core dump?
In this particular scenario, we don't know what is helpful because I think you understood the problem.
Right.
Sorry, yeah. I just erased that, but I think you understood the problem. That somebody has changed something based on that value, right? Some interpretation has happened, and then finally we got some value which we try to access that memory, and we crash. So we don't know. Taking a thread dump also not helpful. Even crash dump is also very difficult in this scenario. But I think you asked one basic question like what is a thread dump? and what is the crash dump. There is another part, like I was repeatedly taking heap dump also. So let me explain these three concepts for you. When we have a crash dump, I think crash dump, I hope it is clear, right? What the crash dump is, because I just explained, like it contains the entire information about the process, whether it can be memory, whether it can be thread information or complete process information, process memory information, everything will be there in crash. Now, what is the difference between heap dump? Okay. And what is the difference between memory dump? That this is what you asked, right? Thread dump, not memory. Memory dump is nothing but a heap dump only. Thread dump.
Right, yeah. And that HSERRPID file, what information does it have? Does it have combination of all these three, or does it have only the crash information, crash dump information?
Very, very good question. I'll explain that also. So you want to know about HSRF file, what HSRF file contains. Okay, great. I gave one session maybe in 2016 period about this content of HSRF file. I'll just revamp on that. Okay, what is the heap dump? What is
Firoz, sorry, before you go there, in the scenario you just mentioned where you have this corruption because of what happens in a multi-threaded environment, and it just goes ahead and then crashes, and it's very difficult. Any suggestions? I mean, you guys must have seen this multiple times. So what do you do in this kind of scenarios? What happens? I mean, it's just like a brute force approach, trying to figure out what happens where, or is there some tips for us?
I think very great questions are coming. Thanks for asking this question. And I'll take an example also. I will note down here. It's very difficult to note down. I will note down here. So basically you are asking, like in the damage has happened earlier and we went ahead and then we crashed. So how we debug such scenarios, or how we take care not to happen again, or take care of certain scenarios, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just note down on my notebook so that I can cover that. Let me explain these things first, because unless and until you have this concept clear, so you will not understand what I'm going to talk about. The question what you have. So basically you are trying to understand scenarios where crash had happened early, the crash happened later, but damage has happened before itself.
Yes, because in this case, we probably will take a lot of time to even figure this out, that the damage was done earlier, just to reach to that. So, I mean, since you have been seeing this kind of thing, what are your tips for?
Yeah, sure. I'll explain that. Do we have? Okay. Oh, I think I did some mistake. Okay. Do I need to write it again? Sorry. What I will do now, I think writing with the mouse is very, very difficult. I will use my standard way of writing here. So you wanted to know what is crash core file, right? Sorry, crash dump. And you want to know what is heap or memory dump. And you want to know what is thread dump. This thing you want to know, right? And the question is, one more question is scenarios. I think I have noted down on one. I don't want to spend time. Okay, so crash dump. So I think I explained how the crash dump happened. Even though I don't want to use, but I find this is the easier way to explain. So you are running process. So this is your process. It has its own memory. Here, this is a memory. Okay, so process in the sense means it might have already running a lot of threads here. We don't know, right, how process is running, and in your multi-threaded application, it could be running a lot of threads here, and all these threads will be operating on this memory only. Process memory only it has to operate, but they will have their own thread. Okay, so they have their own threads here. They have to operate on that thread stack. Okay, so these are all information will be there in the crash dump. So all threads will have the thread memory. Now, so when you take a core dump, right? When you take a core dump, so everything will be dumped. This process information also will be dumped. Okay, all thread information will be dumped. Okay, and then the memory information will be dumped. So this file is nothing but your crash dump. Okay, or core file. You understood this crash dump? This is a crash dump. Okay. Now you want to take heap dump or memory dump. So if you take this dump, right, the memory dump, this is the second. Okay, so you take the memory over a period of, you will be keep taking the memory because you are not interested in what all threads is doing, what all process is doing. You don't want this and you don't want this. You want only this memory. So this is called heap dump or memory dump. Okay, so this is memory dump. What is a thread dump? For example, like you don't want to know what this process is doing, process information, because I am aware of it, because I am not interested in it. I am not interested in also memory also, because I at least bothered. But I just want to examine what my threads were doing. Okay, state of all the threads, stack of all the thread information. So this I can dump. So this is called as thread dump. Okay, so it is clear, right? So you have a process has its own information, what exactly it is doing, how many threads it is running, what is its PID ID, all that things is called as a process information. Thread have their own running state of the thread, running, waiting, like died thread, like it will not have information, but waiting, or it can be like running in native. All the thread information, their own stack, their own chunk of thread local access, like the TLA is we call TLA, like every thread will have its own chunk of memory in the memory. So that part it will be running and operating on that. So that information, all the information will be there, which will be captured. And then the major part, your heap, on which you are operating, the process is operating on that. And there is another concept like mapped memory. I don't want to get into that because again, that things, it will complicate the thing. So I hope you understood this. The complete information will be there in crash dump. Only the memory related information will be there in heap dump, and thread related information will be there in thread dump. So this is clear. So we are done with crash dump, heap dump, and
Firoj, one more thing. Can I say that heap dump and thread dumps can be taken with a live application also?
Whereas, yes, you can take. You can.
Whereas core dump will be always with a kind of dead application.
Yeah, core dumps you can take only with the not only dead application. You can still take the core dump with the live application. Vaibhav.
Okay, we have to call for the kill, is it?
Exactly. You have to signal that. For example, I think in Windows we can do that. Right click and core dump. I think Linux also you can still do that. I don't remember exactly, but Windows we used to do it. Right click and take a core dump or thread dump. We can do that.
And this all thing will be stop the world event, right? I mean, you will really stop the application and then on you will take the dump.
Yeah, you have to stop the application, because what happens, right? If you have seen my SafePoint session lecture, right? Session, right? Because if you take a thread dump, for example, let's not get into complicated. Let's take a heap dump. If you are taking heap dump, if you're not stopping the application, it will be keep modifying. You will not get the right value, but you have to stop. You have to stop. You have to be in an atomic state, consistent state. Then only you can take a heap dump. Even same with the threads also. Threads will be changing the state now and then, right? So if you are not in a stable way, like you are not consistent, like you have to stop the complete, not stop, pause the thread, all the threads, what they were doing, and then take a dump. And then they will start as resume and start doing their work. But ZGC, it is the other way around. We generally don't do, we play around with the thread local handshake. Again, it's a different concept, but most of the cases, this is the case.
Whereas if we take the, you said in Windows, if we right click and take the core dump, it kill the application and before after that, or it will still let the application because we are forcing to get a core dump.
I don't think it should kill application. Why it should kill application? It has to just dump what exactly it was doing. The application was state of the application. Maybe it may just pause the application for a while, but I don't think it should kill the application.
Okay.
Yes.
Theoretically, right?
I agree with you, Firoj.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. So one more question, interesting question asked was that like
this
scenario where
this is just that when application dies, we write a thread dump. The core dump. But even a running application in between can write a core dump if on your demand.
Yeah, it can do that on your demand.
Right,
but
so,
this is what the operating system has to take a default action.
Correct.
So,
correct. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, because this is I'm talking about the with the reference to the what I can say, user, like we debug a lot of applications in such application, but you might have seen like Windows, whenever the crash happened, it used to give an error message. Nowadays it's not coming. It used to ask like, do you want to submit this? Okay, when you submit that, it used to go to the Microsoft, what I can say, like a crash location, and then they used to analyze that crash. We have spent a lot of, I think Vaibhav is aware, like millions of crash we have seen, such crashes where like there's something went wrong, and it just prompt you something here window. Okay, do you want to submit this? I think you might have seen, right? Nowadays it's not coming. But earlier, I think you might have seen that it used to show one small window. Do you want to submit this? If you say yes, right, your crash will go to the Microsoft crash location, and then they will take that and they will analyze. Okay, with that, right, they have all the information, all the process information. I think people are aware of this. Okay, so in certain scenarios also it is very much helpful, because they don't know what scenario you got a crash, but you got a crash. It is helpful for them to analyze. Okay, so this is what the concept is. Next was like, Vaibhav, is it clear? Like, shall I go to take the next, answer the next question?
This is perfectly fine. At least I can understand a bit.
Okay.
And I hope everyone can understand here.
Anyone have not seen that dialog box, small dialog box, application crashed, Eclipse just crashed, and you will see one small dialog box saying that, okay, do you want to submit this application? The Microsoft application, basically we used to see it earlier, but nowadays I'm not seeing in Microsoft Windows 10 usually, but earlier I used to see a lot in Windows 7 and Windows 8. Okay, if you're not seen, it's great. If you're seen also, it's great. I think why you have seen and what the use of that uploading log is clear. Next, I just want to cover the scenario where crash happened later, and crash happened later, but the problem has happened much earlier. We have seen a lot of garbage collector related crashes. Okay, what happens, right? In garbage collector, basically the garbage collector crashes are, like crashes where it may happen due to a bad native code, where you're trying to access some bad native code, and bad native code is nothing but you are running some third-party code and you are trying to access that, and then you realize that the code is not proper or not right, not suitable for that operating system. They have written some problem in that code. What you do is that you just, GC has to run, right? It has to just allocate memory or allocate some pointer for that, and when it's trying to deallocate that memory, you realize that, oh, this is not the right way to do that. Okay, and then you just went and crashed. Now you don't know whether it is really a GC crash or it is, right now you are saying it is GC crash, but we don't know why exactly, because GC is nothing but it is a garbage collection algorithm itself is running. Is it a problem in the algorithm, or you don't know whether the problem in the algorithm, but now it realized that the algorithm just crashed because there is some bad pointer has generated. But the pointer has generated because of some different code which has happened much earlier when the loading time. Okay, so this is pretty much possible that we can get into this scenario. This was the question that you wanted to clarify, whether we have seen such a scenario. One is thing, how will you deal with this? Frankly speaking, it is very difficult to deal certain scenarios. The scenario which I explained, like to avoid bad native code, we have some flags like verify JNI code, because native code is happening from the JNI. Excheck JNI, there is a flag. You can use that flag to limit itself. Before only it just gives the error and application will not execute because it identified there is some bad native code. And another flag is that bad instruction, to catch bad bytecodes. It is like xverify none. You should not be using xverify none. You should be using xverify all, which is by default in JDK. Apart from that, if you want to see any other scenarios where it hits, it is very difficult to diagnose, or not only diagnose, to prevent. Yeah, but in JDK we have these two flags to prevent certain scenarios. I hope this, I'm not sure who asked this question, but I hope this is clear. Generally speaking, in bigger terms, very difficult, and we cannot avoid certain scenarios. There are certain questions are coming in the chat also. Written map thread stack element. I don't understand this. What is this? Okay, in Java thread dumper runtime we have the static method.
That's just information, Firoz. There is no question.
Okay, no question for me, right? Okay. Any other question for me before I jump into a demo? I hope we are not going beyond the time, right? Okay.
No,
So-
that was the whole idea of Jug, that we should go beyond the time.
Great. Okay, fine. So I hope everybody will understand the C code, right? So I have taken a very small C code here. So what it does, let me explain to you what it does. There is a main method here. It takes two arguments, the first name and the last name from the user. And what it does is that it just calls a print name method. And inside the print name, you have two variables, which are global variables, the first name and last name. I have just created just to demonstrate you what is the problem here is. So what I will do is I will allocate a chunk of memory for these two global variables, which I just declared over here. Okay. And just allocate the memory for them. And what I'm doing for allocate, I'm calling this mymalloc function, which is allocating, returning a malloc, a chunk of memory through a malloc call. And once you allocate, what you do, right? The first name and last name, which I passed from the main, which was passed to the print name here. So first name and second name. Here the first name and last name, the arguments you pass, the same arguments you copy into first name and last name, and then the same thing will be printed here, first name and last name. And how the argument copy is happening with the MySQL copy function. Here what it does is it does a character by character copy. Okay, every character it copies until it realizes that there are no further characters, and then it returns that this is a destination and this is a source from, and then it is copying it to 2. Okay, why I have taken again a reference pointer which is I'm written over. Okay, so and then finally I'm printing it over here. So let me run this program. By looking, you can realize that it looks pretty good. Really, it is good because it doesn't have any errors. Okay, so let me run this particular program. So it is here. What I will do, right? I will use GCC to compile this particular program for 32-bit platform. So using m-32bits indicate that I am compiling it for 32-bit platform. Why I am using 32-bit? It is like when the crash happens, right? It is easier for me to explain you how the things work. If I take x64-bit, by default GCC, lot of optimization happens. Again, it is difficult for me to explain you and for you also to understand. Let's take 32-bit and understand like how the things are happening. Okay, so the name of the program is printf, and I will give it to output as a print name. Okay, so let's run print name. This is executable. So sorry, it needs first name and last name. Let me pass my name only, Faraz Matte. Okay, so it has finally printed my name, Faraz Matte. There is no problem. The code is working perfectly fine. Okay, I will introduce some bug here in this code now. Okay, you will not be able to see this. You can see this. There are three, four files. I think I have opened here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This you don't worry. This is the second file which is shown here. This is the first file which I am not just. If I just click on this, you will understand what is the bug. I am not going to click over there. Let it be a climax, and we'll try to figure it out what the bug we have introduced. Okay, so let me go to that location, which is in my desktop. Code file. Okay, so this is the file here. Let me delete my experiment with this. Okay, so I'll do the same thing. I will compile this file, printname.c, take output with print name. Okay, and I will run the print. So it is expecting two parameters, right? Okay, so you can see that segmentation fault happened. Some problem happened. We don't know what exactly went wrong, what signal it has received. We don't know anything. Okay, just we are getting the core dump. Where the core file is generated, it has to dump in the current location only, but we are not seeing the file. Why? The interesting thing is that if you allow everybody to like this process is running in a normal user space, right? This command prompt itself is a process, okay, which is running in a normal mode. Not I am not a root user. This you understand, right? If I sudo if you do, it will be hash. For a root, it will be hash. So this is normal user. Okay, so it is running. If I allow everybody to keep dumping the crashes, right, then my memory will be go out of memory. My OS only will be filled. So by default, it is not allowed. So how I can allow the crash to be dumped in the with the user process? So there are some user limits in the sense like the current process, right? It can give its own user limit with ulimit. There is utility called as ulimit. Let me explain you that man ulimit. If you exit from this command prompt, right, then your ulimit is gone. if you launch another terminal, for example, like if I launch another terminal here, it has its own ulimit. Okay, ulimit -c is for core. If you see, right, it is 0 here. That is the reason we didn't get the core dump. So it is the same here. Ulimit is for get and set user limits. Okay, so I'm running in the user mode. Let me set the limit here. Ulimit -c is for the core. So if I do only this one, it is like a getter method. There are two ways. Maybe I didn't allow you to people to read here. So it says get and set user limits. So there are two things you can do. You can get or you can set. So getter is also there, setter is also there with ulimit call. So how getter works? If you do like this, right? Ulimit -c is for the core file. If you do, it is a getter method. Sorry about that. Now you can see that what is the ulimit for the core file? It is a 0, means 0 size. There is no size allowed, so it cannot dump a core file. Okay, even though the application says it is core dump, it is not dumped actually. The core file is not generated. How you can allow? What you can do? You can say ulimit -c is for core file, and you can specify the size here. What size you want the core file to generate in bytes. Now the interesting fact here is that if you, let's see my core file, I don't know what will be the size, because how big your application, we don't know, because how much memory it will be using, how many threads it will be launching, we don't know all that information. Now if I specify like 250 MB size, the problem what happens, right, the core file may be truncated or it is corrupted, because it can capture only the initial information and then later whatever will be there, right, it just missed out. So generally for core files, what we do is we specify unlimited. Unlimited means, okay, write whatever space available. If it is not able to write, I think the question was came earlier, right? This process only will be thrown with out of memory and just gone. The core file will not be there. Okay. Again, let me call the getter method. So you can see that size is unlimited. Let me run my program again. This print name. Okay. Is waiting for our user output. Now the core is done. You can see the file, core file. Now, if you examine what is the file type, you can ask me what I am doing. Okay, I'll be doing a bit faster here, because this is the place where we'll be working the command prompt. So I know how to quickly write and how to quickly execute. But if you are not understanding, just stop me anytime. I will explain what command will do what. Okay. So if you see the this file command will tell you the what is the file type of the argument what you have passed for the file command. So this core. So it will tell you what is the type of the file. Now you know, right? We have generated for 32-bit platform. So the same thing, the core, it says that name of the file is a core, and it is what it is, ELF 32-bit LSB core file. Okay, ELF is nothing but executable and linkable file. For all executable files, for example, like in my directory also I have another executable file, this print name, it is also executable file. Your .eso files, which are linkable files, right? They are also linkable files. So they also of type ELF. So if I do file, this print name, you can see again it is also ELF file, because it is an executable file, right? So core file is also executable file. Everything will be chunked with sections. I will not get into that detail. If you want, you can read in the Google. A lot of information is available. Another information is it tells like on what architecture, platform or architecture it is based on. It is Intel 8386. Again, going to the first semester in I'm from computer background. In my first semester, there was a subject called as electronics and communication. They taught me like 8086 that time. I think 80586 from different architecture, not 80386. That tells you that what architecture it is. So it is 32-bit architecture. If you are read about more about this, right, you will understand it is 32-bit architecture. Again, very low level concepts are coming, but they are very much attached to your basic concepts. And then it tells about what the process. Okay, this is the process name, print name is the process, and it tells about what argument it has taken, like Fyros Mate is the two parameters it has taken. And there are a couple of other details which are not relevant for us now, and what the execution happened. Okay, it happened on i686 or i386 are for 32-bit. Okay, otherwise you will have x64 here. Okay, so this indicates that it is designed for 32-bit platform. Okay, Now you understood the core file is generated, what is the type of the core file. Now let's examine our application, why the crash happened. What I will do is I will use GDB to open my core file. Okay, how I can open GDB? GDB takes two parameters. One is second parameter is optional. First parameter is it will take name of the application. Okay, because it has to read all the information from the application, right, which will match to the core file, and then try to tell you like why the core was generated, and then the core file. Okay, or this core file is optional. You can just launch with the file name, the executable name, and then you can say core and then open the core file here. This is also a way to open the core file. Let me go to the basics of it. GDB print application name, and then the name of the my core file name is core itself. So I'll open it. Okay, so you just got the core file opened. Now you can examine that. As soon as you open the core file, when the core file generated, we just saw that there was a segmentation fault happened, but we don't know why that segmentation fault happened. Now you can see that the core was generated by this particular application and with this particular parameter, and the program terminated with signal segmentation fault. I think we saw that right in the man page of the signals. This segmentation fault is by default action of this segmentation fault is generator code. Let me open it again. Sorry, I think I just clicked stop share. Share is visible to you guys? Okay,
Yeah.
if you see that, yes. Wait. I just clicked on the stop share action, then everything went off. I got the segmentation fault. This is the signal which I got. I think you can see here, segmentation fault. This is what I got. And the default action of this was to generate a core. Great, I have seen this. My son used to do this, like scribbling on the teacher's screen. I think we got some student who is doing this. Great. Okay, let it be there. Okay, so now I can examine the stack. How you can examine? Yeah, you understood now. Like program is terminated because this is the signal which received, but who has sent this signal? Why this signal received? We have to debug further. Because of this, we know that the small description about that signal, right? There was a segmentation fault. There was some issue with the illegal memory access. That is what the segmentation fault indicates. Now let's see what is the stack. What are the stack contains? So you can either use where, you can use BT, or you can use info stack. Okay, all will the alias for each other, and it tells that how the stack is, your stack looks like that. Let me explain that. Let me stop this a bit, otherwise this will not, annotation will not go. Okay. Sorry, let me write it here only. I don't know why the eraser is not coming. Okay, so how the stack looks like, right? So let me explain that. So this is your stack. Okay, so how the execution start on the stack, right? The first, the method, which is when the process starts, right? What the process has to call. In our C, right? The main method will be called first. So here, what calls, right? You will get main method as the first. Okay, and this main method, whom it is calling print name. Okay, this will be called by main method will be called print name. And what print name is calling? Print name is calling again my str copy. Okay, my str copy, my string copy. So let me show the program to you guys again. So here main method is calling print name. This print name is calling my str copy, and we just crashed here in my str copy. That is what we saw from the core file here, right? So it is like this. So we got crash here, my str copy. This is what it indicates. And how your stack looks like that? Your stack looks, you have a main method, then main method called print name called my str copy, and top of the stack, the top of the frame is this my str copy. You can see that the depth of the stack is showing. Depth is 2 actually, started from 0. So it is like this. This is at depth 0, this is 1, and this is 2. And at depth 0 is the top of the frame. What is the top of the frame? Top of the frame is executing my string function, my not string, my str copy. And the top stack level 1, we have a print name, and stack level 2, we have a main method. So this is how the stack looks like that. Okay, so that is what is printed here. So you have to have the understanding how the stack works, how the calling convention works in C or C++ or in native code. Okay, and now let's examine what the stack content. This is the stack content. Now we have to go to the each and every frame. For example, like so now we have to examine this particular frame, what the content of this particular frame. Okay, so this frame we have to examine and we have to figure it out what exactly it contains. Okay, let's get into there. This frame. Okay, how the information will be stored onto this frame. So you need to have some basic understanding about the platform, how the information will be captured on the frame, and what information will be there in that particular frame. Okay, so what happens, right? Whenever the frame starts, right, there's something called as a base pointer. Base pointer contains the starting of the frame. Okay, and you have a lot of instruction here to execute, a lot of information on the stack, and the last information or last instruction to be executed on the stack called as a stack pointer, which is indicated by the SP. Okay, so base pointer, there are some registers in Linux which are dedicated to store these two information. So base pointer will be stored in EBP in 32-bit platform. In 64 it will be RBP. So in our case it is EBP, and SP will be stored in ESP. Okay, just remember that this is how it works. I'm getting into register level. Maybe for few people it will be bouncer, but just stay tuned with me. So now you understood what is EBP and what is ESP. Let's get into the code. Let's examine the frame. How you can examine the frame? You can do info frame. That will take you to the frame. And we are in which frame? That how you can examine? You can do frame. Just frame if you type, it will tell you which frame you are in. You are in 0th frame. So now if you do info frame, so it will take you to that 0th frame. So, and it tells some detail about that particular frame. For example, like what is your stack level, which is 0th level, it's already informed over here. Frame at this particular address, the frame is at your instruction pointer. Let's not get into this. Name of the method which is executing on that particular frame is this. Who called this particular frame is this guy. Okay, I'll explain this again. It will be difficult for you to understand. And there are other informations here, like what is your EBP. EBP is nothing but you're a base pointer. This is your base pointer. Okay, so a lot of information can be fetched if you know this base pointer, because we already got to know like how we can fetch from the base pointer. Base pointer is nothing but the starting point. Base pointer is this. If you want to fetch a lot of information, we have to start from here only. This is the important, like from the start of the frame. A base pointer is very, very important. Okay, now let's try to understand for this particular method here, right, my str copy. I just want to examine what all the parameters passed to this particular method. Okay, now how I can read in 32-bit coding convention. Changing screen is so difficult here. 32-bit coding convention, how it happens, right? Your base pointer will be there, and I'm in 32-bit platform, which is 4 bytes, right? So base pointer plus 4 will be your return address. Okay, and the base point again adding 4 bytes. Writing will be very difficult here. Let me write it here. So base pointer will nothing but the start of the frame. Okay, base pointer plus 4 is 4 I'm adding here is for the 32-bit architecture. Okay, base pointer 4 is nothing but your return address. We will examine this. Okay, and base pointer plus 8. Okay, I have to explain one more concept before you understand this. Okay, so now all the information has to be moved onto this particular frame, right? Has to be dumped or moved from with respect to my str copy. So how it happens, right? Let's assume that my str copy has a lot of arguments. So how the arguments will be read? The last argument, let's say I have 1 to n arguments here. Okay, So the nth argument will be read first and it will be pushed onto the stack. So where it will be pushed? It will be pushed at the last here, somewhere here. Okay. And n minus 1th argument will be moved here. Okay. And n minus, it will read till 0th argument. And all these parameters will be moved to BP plus 8th location. So here your first parameter will be like base pointer plus 8th location, and then all the parameters will be there after that. Okay, so it is like that. So if you want to read first parameter, you have to read base pointer plus next pointer, which is base pointer plus 8, because it is 32-bit architecture, 4 bytes. Similarly, second parameter will be base pointer plus how much? Any guesses? It will be 12. And third parameter will be base pointer plus 16. We are not interested in this because we don't have a third parameter. We have only 2 parameters. My base pointer plus 4 will be a return address. Base pointer plus 8 will be my first parameter. And my base pointer plus 12 will be my second parameter. Let's read these 2 parameters. Okay. I hope it is clear. Okay. So I know EBP, which is this. So what you can do, you can, if you want, you can read all the register information, because EBP, ESP, I was telling, right? Stack pointer, all that things will be here. This is ESP, or last instruction executing. EBP is the base instruction where you are in, all that information will be there. But that's okay. What we want to know, we want to read the first parameter of this MySTR copy. So what we'll do, we'll read the EBP, because that is the place where we have started reading. So what I will do, it is just memory allocation, right? And I want to read it in hexadecimal. So that is the reason X, I will give /X for reading hexadecimal. And then what I will do, $EBP I can write. So this is my EBP, but I'm not interested in EBP. It is a start location. I'm interested in knowing what is there in EBP plus 4, which is my return address. So this is my return address. So return address somewhere in the code only, what I have to return. So what I can do is I will try to map this particular address location with my symbol, with my what I can say, symbol information. What I can do, info symbol with this particular address. So now it is telling me that somewhere in the print name, this particular offset has the return address. So what I can do, I can just disassemble this print name method. Okay, how I'll do this assemble. This is the command and the print name. I can directly jump to the offset also, but this is the disassembly function for the print name. We are getting into too deep, but yeah, no issues. So if you go to 133th offset, right, that is what it shows. Like there we have a return instruction. So it is a MySTR copy, which we are clear that in MySTR copy only we are crashing. Okay. Now next, what I have to read, I read the EBP plus 4, which is a return instruction. Here EBP plus 8 is my first parameter. This is my first parameter, and EBP plus base pointer plus 12 is my second parameter. Right. So let's read both the parameters and try to understand like what parameter were passed to this particular function. This, what is a from? From is nothing but what here. This from is nothing but the first character F is here, and first name is the newly allocated memory location, which is the 2 here. Okay, so I want to read 2 and from. Let's read them. How can I read? Just EBP plus 8 is the first parameter. What it is showing? Okay, it is 0. So 0 means there is nothing in that. Okay, if I convert into any string or character, it is 0 only. So that means some understanding you are getting that the 2 parameters somewhere is 0, and character star in 0, what? It is a null. So 2 is getting null here. What is the from? We'll examine what passed to here, which came from our print name, right? Let's examine that. It is second parameter is EBP plus 12. Okay. So what we have some value. Let's read that value. How we can read? We can do print. It is a character star, right? So let me try to convert into character star this value. So you can see this 5 rows. The first name is passed correctly. So here in print name function, you allocated some chunk of memory to first name, which is passed here. And this is turning out to be null. And the F came from main method. So here. print name first argument is passed, right, which is here. So this is correct. F is Feroz is passed here. So there's no problem. But this is somewhere turning out to be null. So we don't know why it is turning out to be null. What we can do is like we can examine. So you understood, right? In MyStr copy, the first parameter is has some issue, which is turning out to be null. So that is what we examined here, right? EBP plus head first parameter is null. So which is a problematic. Now let's see why we got this null. Okay. So we know, right, here from the code, we know that this in the print name, this first name is being where and all it used. This is a very simple program we can make out, but in difficult, when complicated applications, it is very difficult to figure it out. So it says that this first name is got it from the mymalloc function. Okay, let's try to deassemble the mymalloc function and try to understand what exactly it has passed, what exactly it has written for the first name. Okay, so let's disassemble this. And one more thing, what I can do is I directly jump to that. Before to that, if you want to examine these parameters quickly, I will show you how you can examine. First of all, where I am at the 0th frame. So how we can do? I can just type frame. So it will show it is 0th frame. So you have to try to understand what are the parameters passed to the print name function. Okay. So what you can do? Sorry. So what you can do? You can just change the frame to 1. If you do, you are in the first frame. Now you have to examine the parameters of the first frame. So I will directly read first info frame to get the EBP. So EBP is this. So what you can do, X, and then you can do EBP plus 8 to read the first parameter. So you got some value. So what I will do, I will try to print, and it is a character star. So I will try to convert this to character star, and then same thing I will do here. So Feroz, first parameter came to this as a Feroz. So this is Feroz here. And what is the second parameter? It's not interested, but I'm just trying to show you. Second parameter, again, we have to do go to 12th and then character star of this. It is Matte. So there are no problem with the parameter passed to this. So that means this doesn't have any problem. But we are interested into trying to understand like, what the mymalloc written for the first name. So let's read that. We are okay. Let me go to the problematic frame. Okay, frame 0. Now what I will do, I will try to disassemble. What I want to disassemble, mymalloc, right? This particular function. I just want to see like what it has written, whether it has written something problematic. So this is the disassembly of the mymalloc function. If you see, it is very small function, mymalloc function. Yeah, right. Now it is correct code. This has a problematic code, but now it is written in proper malloc. Okay. So what I will do, this is the disassembly. If you know how the assembly code works, right? And looking into the code, I can say that this has a return instruction. There is something, it has, the function has a return value. Yes, it has a return value, character star. Okay. How I understood was that your EAX has a return value. Always before returning any function, right? Before return happens, before popping EBP, what it does, right? It moves the return instruction into EAX. So the what return instruction it is moving? It is moving 0, 0 into EAX. Okay. So what EAX contains? What is the return value contains? Return value is nothing but a 0, 0. And my function is returning character star. Character star of 0, 0 is nothing but a null. Okay. So I understood that instead of doing some malloc calculation over here, it is returning null. After debugging, I found out. I think most of you guys agree with that. And that is what my code is. Instead of returning malloc, or it is returning null. That is the reason it crashed. I just went through a very difficult approach for you guys, like some longer route just to understand. But like my colleagues or generally, I am what generally we do, where we are at the frame 0. We just go to disassembly of this MyStr copy. Okay. And we'll see like disassembly here, right? And it shows that where it crashed. This arrow indicates the location of the crash. And you can see that it crashed here, EAX and DL. And this move instruction is nothing but source and destination. So this is the destination and this is the source. I can examine them like print $DL. It shows destination has some value. It should be a character. because I'm doing character by character copy in my this while loop here, right? Character by character copy is happening. So when I'm trying to copy F, that is what it shows here. We are trying to copy F where? Into EAX. What is the EAX value? EAX value is 0. It is an basically it is a memory 0th location, and this percentage here indicate that the memory copy. So you are copying from one memory to another memory. So basically what you are trying to do, you are trying to copy F to 0th memory location, which is nothing but the where the kernel is loaded. I think it is clear. I hope it is clear that 0th memory location you are trying to write something. So this is something definitely segmentation fault is happening here. Now you need to understand from where EAX coming. We generally go and read all these things and trying to understand where my EAX is copied, all that things. So you can see here EBP plus 08 is your this source is copied into EAX, which is nothing but your first parameter. It is difficult for you guys to understand. I can understand that, but for me or my colleagues, right, we read all these things. It is just a shortcut to understand like first parameter is wrong here. Just conclude that, and where first parameter is coming from the my malloc, right? That my underscore malloc function. So that is clear how you debug this program. Now, if you are very interested to understand how this assembly is generated, I can tell you there is a different way of doing that. Instead of compiling your function, right, what you can do is you can compile with the -g option. -g option will generate symbol file also. Okay, once you compiled, you can run. Let me delete the core file first. Okay, what you can do is you can run the program with the same approach. Okay, once you generate the core file. Okay, core file is here. Try to open the core file again with the GDB. Now the core file has a symbol information. So you can see here, as soon as it opened, right, it showed right reading symbols from this particular file. And again, same thing, it's segmentation fault happened. But now lot of information it gave. It went into the source code level and it's telling you that at 16th line, this particular execution of this particular code has led to the crash. And where it is in MySTR copy, and what are the parameter 2 is null, from has some value which is 5 rows here. Everything it is given, and this method starts from the crash happened at the line number 16. You can go to directly to the code and try to match here. But in production environment, we don't have debug symbols enabled. So that is one thing. And now if you want to see like what code is being matched with the assembly code, right, what you can do is you can do disassemble. Default disassemble will just give you the disassembly, which is not much helpful for you. What you can do is /m if you view. It will tell you like what code is matching to what disassembly. So this is the start of the MySTR copy function. This is what we call epilogue, the initial setup. Okay, and then the first instruction in the method, you have a character star, some value here, save is equal to 2, right, which is basically mapped to this. You can understand that the first parameter EBP plus 8 is mapped copied to EAX, and then there is some adjustment is happening. Okay, and then while this particular loop, right, loop will be executed in this instruction and this particular code, and inside the loop you have ++4, which is nothing but some addition to your base pointer plus 06 location. So like that you can map and you can understand. So this is just for you to experiment if you want to experiment. Okay, I hope that is the case. I think I covered like how you can debug. People are very silent. I'm not sure whether you people understood. If you want me to explain again, I can explain again, but I see a lot of chart is coming up. Any questions on the chart, Vaibhav, quickly? If you have read that.
There are few.
Yeah. You want me to?
Anand has asked the question. I was wondering if there is a place that some project automatically builds and give it us and save us building. Anand, unmute and ask the question directly. Anand.
Hey, Ferosh, nice session. Thanks. Where can we download the debug version of the VM automatically from websites? Which website can I get it for different architectures?
Which version in the sense code you want to download?
the debug version of the hotspot, if I want to run with that,
Okay.
the debug binaries, yeah.
Debug binaries we generally don't share with everyone. But what you can do is you can generate debug version by yourself, downloading the source code. Source code anyway you can download from
Yes.
which version of JDK you are looking for.
For JDK 8, we are now trying to run it on RISC-V and things like that. So we were wondering if we can obviously build it ourselves, but it would save us a lot of pain if we can already download the debug versions.
No, debug version generally we don't ship the debug version. Okay, so if you're looking for JDK 8, right? So this is the location of the code. You can download the JDK 8 from here. Okay.
Yes.
And then you can generate your own debug build. For example, there are build instructions available here. You can get into more detail about that, how to generate the debug builds are available. So you can get into that. There are instructions how to generate. There's one flag you have to pass, -flow debug like that. So debug binaries will be generated. Yeah.
Nice. Makes it. Thanks, Ferosh. One more question, Ferosh. In terms of, if you don't mind me indulging you, do you have some war stories? How do you go about, like, hey, here is a core dump, and then if it's crashing somewhere on the GC, it's probably impossible for one human being to understand all the GC algorithms, and then to make sense of what should happen and what happened, right? So how would you go about it? Like in some certain customer crashes, and then it seems difficult thing to do.
Basically, whenever crash happens, right, we get two files actually. Core file is the secondary for us, but the important thing is that we got HSRF file. You people might have already seen this. The question also came in between that what HSRF file contains. So basically, HSRF file contains a snapshot of the crash. For example, like this is in front of screen, I'm just showing one HSRF file. Now it tells you where the problematic frame is. For example, what is the signal you received? Signal is SIG bus, which is again, I showed you, like this is also indicated that you can generate a core dump. There is a bus error. Again, this is invalid memory sort of problem. Okay. In this particular case, signal number will be there. And it also tells you what the problematic frame is. In the sense, like while executing which part of the code in your JDK, you generated a crash. And then it's trying to dump a lot of other information, like what is the top of stack. This generally gives the address location. Okay. And then register information of that, this particular instruction. Okay. And what is the current thread. So these all information are related to the current thread. And then apart from that, state of the variables, what variable content, all that information will be there. Apart from that, what the stack. Okay, so I was telling that main method is calling print name, all that information will be here. Before calling, this gives you that calling convention, how you have come to this particular method. So all this information will be there, and you can see here there are addresses, stack, what is the start of the stack, end of the stack. So in this particular process, how many threads are running? So these are threads are running, and the above whatever it shows, right? It shows the current thread. This indicates the current thread. So you can see that this is the start of the stack, and this is the end of the stack. All that information you can also match your current thread stack is the same. So if you get all these are all addresses for us. So if we know this, we can jump to any stack. Okay. So this HSR file is very important for us. It's a key to open the core file. Basically, now you don't understand, like it's very difficult. You can go to particular stack and then understand what is the start of the stack, what is the end of the stack. But if you know all the pointers here, right, you can directly jump to the core and open this. I'm interested in this particular thread, what it was doing. For example, compiler thread. Even though it shows crashed in the main, right, but if you see on top of right, it is a crashed in the compiled code. So this J here, you can match it here. I'll just show you. This particular J indicator compiled Java code. It crashed in the compiled Java code, so which is generated by the compiler. Okay, so that is what you can interested in, and it is a C2 compiler 2, C1, C2 we have, right? So I will be interested in this particular thread, what C2 was doing at that time. So I can directly jump to this and try to understand what code it was executing, all that information. Even though it crashed in the main method, but not really, because it is a Java crash and crashed in the compiler. Yeah, and yeah, that is I hope it is clear, right?
Yes, it's clear, Ferosh. See, yeah, if for example, reproducing this on the C2 is difficult, and then you have this HRF file and the code dump, and the customer gives you the client code, right? The application code as well. Then how would you also C2 code is not so easy to reason, right? Once it's not reproducible also so easily, then it become I can imagine it can become a pain point, or I don't know, maybe I don't understand how would you go about it at that point in time. Okay, you looked at the code and then it seems reasonable and you can't reproduce the problem, then what you do?
If we can't reproduce the problem is we ask for this HSLF file and the core file, then we start analyzing. As simple as that. But if you are able to reproduce it, then we have different approaches. We don't get into core file because opening a core file, reading a core file is also painful, because it is not that easy with the demonstrator. Even though the program was very simple, we have to investigate a lot of other things, a lot of other factors. In this case itself, though the crash seems like happened in the main method, but not exactly. It happened on the compiler generated method. So the things will be complicated here, right? Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
Cyrus, I have a question. Just when this you were giving the demo, right? I experienced something on my machine locally. It was with Zoom, so what happened was the entire the machine was frozen. It was on for a long time, for at least a minute. It was there where the screen was just frozen, keyboard was not responding, nothing was responding, and then it rebooted.
Okay.
So yeah, so it was a crash. But how do I come out? How do I try to debug such crashes? You can't ask it to take a code dump at this moment because your keyboard is also frozen.
Correct. Right, I understood what the scenario. It is basically hang. What you are trying to say
because
is
someone is hugging the CPU.
Right, understood. Basically, it is like you observed a hang.
Yeah.
Right? Where you cannot do much, but you want to analyze that what was wrong. Right. Basically, we have, you might have seen this JVisual VM or JMS, right? Now, yeah, JMC. Now you'll ask like how I can launch JVisual VM where I cannot do anything. You can still do that. You can get into some remote machine. But only thing is that your application should be enabled to a remote access.
Okay?
So open JVisual VM from different application and then open, like from.
Okay. Actually, it remained in that hang position for only a minute and then it rebooted.
Yeah, still you can do that.
Okay, so during that time itself, I'll have to try to.
Then if it is coming back in 1 minute, you can add logs and see like when that debug happened, what logs it get printed. That is easier. But if it is not coming out, means you can use some Visual VM or JMC kind of applications and trying to open that through that and see like on which thread it was executing when it got hacked. Both are doable.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, that's fine. Thank you, sir.
Yep. Yeah. If not, then I think we are already just 2 minutes to our expected time. I think I just finished in 40 minutes in my when I presented in our 45 minutes, if I'm not wrong, in our local IDC. I don't think people who understood this much, but here I got very nice questions. It's really good. If you have any additional questions, you can send across to my email ID, which is there. If you want to know, just type it over here. So it is.
Great session, Feroz. Yeah.
Thank you. This is my email ID.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to write sometimes. Yeah. I should have printed this somewhere before. But if you know Vaibhav, you can reach out to him. He will reach out to me. You know Satish, Soik, other people as well. This is my mail ID. If you have any additional questions, you can point. But somebody was mentioning that they were working on some different port, not like x86 or x64, some PPC platform. Somebody was mentioning that.
RISC-V.
Yeah, RISC-V. Yeah, that is the embedded platform. So if you want any additional questions, you can reach out to me. Yeah. If there are no questions, then I would like to just stop. If you have any questions, you can ask now.
No, it's just that not many people are aware of all those comments that you kind of I mean you just typed and then showed us that memory allocation issues and all. In general, if something like this happened to us more number of times, very often earlier and during the early stages of the project, but we generally read the dump file, see the problematic frame initially. Is it custom code, native code, or some other dependent third-party jar code? And once we identify that, we may update the jar file to the recent version or probably change the current code. But we never tried that disassemble function or reading the address of that location with +8, +12. I mean, honestly speaking, for us to troubleshoot something like this using a core dump or a thread dump is just read it, understand it, Google it, and then put it into some UI. Readily available UIs are there, and then even get some more better understanding rather than doing that whatever you try to explain. So hopefully, yeah, it's a good learning for us, but it's not just a one-time thing to understand it all. So obviously, we need to do it again and again to get that much expertise. Yeah, this is helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, you need to have some hands-on experience to understand.
But we never went into that far to understand the real problem. Going into memory addresses and all might not be that much helpful for us to fix that.
Yeah, understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else has any other questions, additional questions you want to ask? Vaibhav, Satish. If not, then I will just close the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, this is not directly related, but I'm just curious. So whatever topic that you told on a high level, what I'm thinking is it's at the memory level, right? But I as a Java developer work in Java where it hides that complexity from me, right? I don't even need to worry about memory. It's a given thing. So in a way that, do you think in future you will expect people also to be aware of memory also, because there is some foreign function or something is coming in where I see that there is a memory management specific classes also coming in Java JDK. So do you think that it's in future, I as a Java developer should be aware of part of memory management?
I think what I feel, right, irrespective of what programming languages you use, everything will boil down to zeros and ones end of the day. And just boiling down to that, just before to that, we have assembly code. And if you know how the things will turn out to assembly, not always you should know, but it is a basic thing, right? If you go to any institute or any college, right, they're trying to tell you like basic things, how the OS, what is the functionalities of OS, what OS does, what is the things OS is supposed to do. If you know that, you are much clear like how the things will work on top of it, right? Again, it boils down to things like what understanding one should have about the OS. Like in before to us, like the senior people when we were in college, like they used to teach us assembly programming, but when we got into like we just started with C++ and then later submissions we got Java and all. But nowadays people are learning Go, COBOL, all that things, different languages, right? It changes the era, how the things are, like now the high level architecture has been taught, but earlier it was not the case. It was like even so many languages have come in, but if you go to colleges, they still go with C++ kind of languages where you will have basic understanding and you will understand a lot of things in more detailed way. So that is how it should be. Like people should be very close to their basic things. Then the high level things will be very easy for them to match. That is what my understanding is, and everyone should have the same.
In a way, you are saying it's like fashion repeats itself. Like we moved away from hardware sometime before, but now it's actually we are going again also same way. That is
yes. See how happens, right? When I started my career in software development, right, I was in a company where we used to manufacture set-top boxes, which used to have a very small memory. So if you write a single line of code also, you have to take care of, right? Like it should not, it should be memory efficient code in the sense like what happens if I run this code on the memory, which is very 128 MB memory of the, not 128, only 32-bit RAM size, 32 MB RAM. So it has to run my application, and there never used to be like secondary memory for that. Everything will be on that itself. So then you have to worry, like we have to worry like what code we are writing, and how it is getting executed, and how much memory it is taking, how much if you write what exactly will be assembly code is generating. So all that things we used to bother much. So but nowadays like larger hardwares are coming, so many cores are there. There is no restriction on the RAM, all that things, right? People are very free to write. I'm not sure like whether you stick to that understanding like how efficient code you will write, but nowadays nobody bothered much about that.